Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 126 of the Big Time Strength Podcast. I am your host, Gage Rozier. Hope everybody's staying warm out there. I think this is a frigid time for pretty much the entire country, which is pretty crazy. But really excited today. We're going out to South Dakota School of Mines with Coach Brock. Really excited to have him on. He just kind of transitioned to a head role a few months ago, and really excited to kind of learn from him on what he's found out and what he's learning. And what he's doing with that program there in South Dakota, which is exciting stuff on his end. But before we get to him, I want to get through one of our sponsors and also plug our Big Time Strength and Football Clinic coming up. So our first sponsor is TeamBuildr. They're the leading software for high schools and colleges by providing coaches the ability to write programs online, generate reports, and even train athletes remotely for side income. If you sign up with code BIGTIME, you will receive a free programming template, which works automatically within TeamBuildr. No more spreadsheets and workout cards to track your training maxes that always change day by day. Automate your programming without outsourcing your programming with TeamBuildr. If you've listened to the show, you know we're big fans of TeamBuildr here. They do a tremendous job, have a great product. Customer service is off the charts. Can't recommend them enough. If you're interested in getting on that 14-day free trial, I believe they're still doing. Hit up Hewitt. His contact information is in our show notes. Please reach out to them for all your software needs. All right, now, speaking of TeamBuildr, they are one of our main sponsors as well for our Big Time Strength and Football Clinic coming up on March 27th in Mount Vernon, Iowa. All credit goes to Coach Preston Peterson, our other host that does our high school coaches. He has put all this together, and he's done a tremendous job. He's got, I believe, 20 or 21 coaches, both strength and football coaches, coming in to spend the day to talk shop in Mount Vernon, and it's going to be a great time. We got great speakers. You can find all the information. There's a link in our show notes, or just check out Coach Preston, the Mount Vernon Speed and Strength, Twitter, Instagrams, and all that. He has all the links on that in the show notes as well. Please sign up. We're excited to come together, hopefully in a COVID way. It might probably be everybody's first clinic coming back from COVID. He's got a really good plan to keep everybody safe, but also have a really great time in clinic. So please sign up. That'd be great. Moving on. That's enough talk for me. I want to get to why you guys are listening to this, and that's to hear from great coaches. So Coach Brock, how you doing, man? I'm going to kind of turn this over to you and just let you kind of give us some background on, I guess, where you're at right now, where you've been, and how you're doing.
Gage, I appreciate you having me on, man. I guess a little bit about me. Originally from St. Louis, Missouri. Played football at Northwest Missouri State from 2012 to 2015. I was lucky enough to be a part of a great program there. Won a couple of national championships. From there, it's also where I started as a coach. Whenever I was done playing football, I had another year of undergrad left. So I decided to intern with Coach Joe Quinlan there and his staff, which was great. Their GAs were an awesome help to me for so Grant Allen and Dakota Steiner at the time. They were great as far as developing me as a young strength coach. That was the first time I really, other than being an athlete, got kind of, I guess, the opportunity to be a coach. And from there, went on, did a summer internship at TCU in the summer of 2017 under Zach Dakant. Straight from there, got a GA spot out at Central Washington University, spent 2 years there under Eric Hoyam. And then from there, went down to the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina. It was my first full-time job. I was the Assistant Director of Strength and Conditioning there under Donnell Boucher, who was one of my biggest mentors. And then was there for about, 13 months. It's a little bit over a year. And then got hit up from Coach Floor, who was the guy that recruited me to play at Northwest Missouri State. Was the offensive coordinator at the time. He ended up taking the head football job at South Dakota Mines. Their strength coach was leaving. He hit me up asking if I would be interested in taking this job. One of the first people I reached out to was Gage, kind of just because I wanted to reach out to other young strength coaches that took head jobs while they were young, kind of see where their head was at the time in that process. Gage definitely said some words to me that helped me feel like I was definitely ready for the job. So took the job and interviewed and took the job in August of this past year, started like August 10th or something like that. So I've been here for the last, I don't know, 6 months or so.
So I think every time I need like a Joe Q alert button that every time Joe Q is mentioned on the Big Time Shrink podcast, an alarm sounds or something because,
That's good.
you know, he's comes from, you know, a lot of obviously the coaches we know. But I kind of want to go back to that just a touch. And I want you to think about like when you did that first internship at TCU, because Joe runs a tremendous program. I just remember, like for me, my first internship, it was at Mizzou. I remember just like even the first day, like all I knew at that point was how Joe ran the weight room, and just seeing day one at Mizzou was like, oh, it's like a whole new world. There's a lot of similarities. It's the same stuff, you know, we're all lifting, but just how they did things is just different. Not any better or worse or whatever, but just different. Is there anything that kind of strikes you about maybe not even TCU, but I mean any of the other places on just like kind of eye-opening facts or thoughts?
So I'll say TCU was interesting because they're Power 5, but they don't have separate football and Olympic staffs. So the director there oversees football, obviously, and then everybody else helps with football, but also has their own sports. And while I was there in the summer, I was primarily with football, but then like baseball started up, I think, kind of like halfway through my internship, the freshman baseball guys came in, really got to work with them and see how Zach Dakent coached and operated with their Block Zero group. And then I think they had volleyball there, women's soccer towards the very tail end, and then men's basketball. And it's interesting to see almost how like wildly different coaches operate within the same staff almost. Like the baseball program and the basketball program at the time were run completely different than the football program was. Whether it's from a setup, whether it was from the actual things that they were doing or how they operated, it was wildly different. I'm not here to really give a whole lot of props to anyone or throw anyone under the bus, but there's definitely programs there that, or I guess teams there that are run a little bit better, in my opinion, than some of the others. And a lot of it has to do, I would say, one, I think philosophy. I don't necessarily think that if your philosophy doesn't align with mine, that makes you a bad coach by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think there's certain things that need to be hit in a strength and conditioning program that with some of the programs at TCU at the time just wasn't getting done. But that was also 4 years ago. So who knows how things have adapted and changed over time. But also what I liked about TCU was there was, with some of their programs, was a lot of autonomy. And I kind of stolen that from there, where they give their athletes, from some of their sports, they give their athletes kind of like the ability to coach, like lead warm-ups and stuff like that, which I thought was cool. And that's something I've stolen. But yeah, I mean, I would say that like Joe Q runs a very tight program. I would say out of everywhere that I've been, it's definitely one of the top programs. It's up there with like the Citadel. Citadel operates at a very high level. They have for years. Donnell does a great job of assembling great staffs and trusting them to run their own parts. And it's just been, I've been lucky to be a part of quite a few programs that definitely operate at a high level, I guess to say.
Yeah, the people you've worked are great. I mean, I don't know any of them other than Joe Q, but just from the outside looking in, they're just tremendous coaches. But I guess my next big question for you, and this is kind of one I really want to attack with you, was, I think it's Ron McKeefer, it probably is, that said, like, you're not really a strength coach until you set in the main chair, right? In the head chair. As the assistant, yeah, you coach, but you don't have to make all the decisions. So, what are some things that since just August you've started, some things that you've learned now that you're sitting in that head chair compared to just being, a smaller piece at the Citadel and these other places?
Yep. I will say one thing that I took for granted, it was almost arrogant about, was establishing relationships with people within the front office, outside of the athletic director. That was one thing that Donnell at the Citadel really encouraged us to do. The front office staff here and in most of your smaller schools are all housed in the same building, but at TCU they were housed in where the basketball arena is at, which is different from where we were at in the weight room. But he always encouraged us, hey, at least, once or twice a week, pop over there, check in on them, just talk, make small talk with them, but it'll make their day. And you never know what those people can do to help you later on down the line. You don't know who in that building is going to be the next athletic director at a different school that could possibly lead you to getting a job. And when I was there, I understood the value in it, but I never really did it. In all honesty, I was pretty bad at it. The only time I would ever go talk to people in the front office is when I went with Donnell. I rarely ever, I think maybe once in my 13 months there, popped over there and actually went and tried to establish relationships, which is something I would do totally different now. Here, I've definitely come to realize where having relationships with the office manager, with the people in compliance, and having just relationships across the board in the front office can definitely be beneficial for me. So that would kind of be my main takeaway, is if somebody's telling you to do something like that, don't be arrogant to the fact that, they're probably doing it for good reason. They're probably doing it to help set you up for success, because maybe one day you're going to be in a position where you need to establish those relationships. So that's something I've learned a lot, where now myself, Coach Carl, the assistant director here, we try to pop up there, almost daily and just talk to people. So that's something that I've learned a lot. Organization, obviously, is huge. And I feel like organization in a head role is different than when you're an assistant. When you're an assistant, you have to be organized for your teams, or at the Citadel. Towards the end of my my time at the Citadel, we kind of broke up the football team like you would see at a Power 5, FBS type school, where all of the assistants had a certain I was the power program guy. So all of our guys that we deemed were strong enough that were mainly going to be our velocity-based training guys, our speed guys. I was in charge of programming their, over the summer, I was in charge of writing up their program. I had to go over it with Donnell, but that was my role on the football team. I had to also be organized in that standpoint. I can't get up in front of the football team and just not have my stuff together. But now I have to be organized with my teams, but I also have to make sure that Carl is organized with his teams. I need to make sure that our weight room schedule is where it needs to be. I have to push that out to admin, because we have people that want to come down here and lift in admin, but can only lift at certain time of the day. They don't know if we have teams. So it's just kind of trying to stay on top of little things as far as an organization standpoint, with not only what's going on down here, but also knowing what's going on, I guess, with our facilities guy, knowing hey, we can't be outside for football today. I need to be able to know, hey, do we have gym space available to where we can go inside instead? So that's kind of stuff that you don't really take into account when you're an assistant, because that stuff just magically happens because somebody else takes care of it. But it's definitely something that I've, almost come to appreciate, to be honest, just because I feel like when you're an assistant, you just feel like you're a minor piece of the puzzle, and here you kind of feel like you have more of a hand in everything else that's going on.
Yeah, I think you bring up some really good points. I think just the relationship with admin is huge. And I just think about, just in our situation right now, with everybody wants to train inside because it's 1 degree outside, so we don't have so much space like we normally would. So working with the facilities admin on that. But I do want to tell a quick story about, you're talking about, Donnell making you talk to administration and stuff. And, Joe did it to me when I was a GA just one time. And he said we had to order more protein. And that had to be authorized by whoever the admin was. And I had never talked to the guy ever before. all Joe said was, hey, go up to so-and-so, I don't even remember his name, order more protein and do not take no for an answer. Okay. All right. So I went up there and just said, hey, we need more protein, thinking that the guy, it's a common thing. The guy knows what he's doing. He's like, looks up from his desk. He's like, no. So I was like, I was just, shocked. And I just went down to Joe. I was like, yeah, he said no. So, but I almost think like they were in on it or something. But I think that's a great point, though. Just having those relationships outside of just our department, it garnishes more respect for your department and more trust to the admin. I think that's a great point. And I think that's good for, if you are a head guy, put your assistants in those positions. I think that's something I could do a better job of too. But let's get into your program a little bit. Let's talk about, what's the culture you're trying to establish there with your guys and your teams.
Yep. So I'll say that we try our best to marry up our weight room culture with their team culture. Like football and women's basketball is not going to look the exact same from a culture standpoint down here. So we try to marry it up to an extent to where whatever the coaches are preaching in that sport, we're trying to preach the same things down here. But our biggest thing, obviously, you're going to hear this everywhere, but it's the little things. I need you to show up on time. I need you to give your best effort when you're down here. I need you to be a good teammate. That's one thing that we're working on a lot here with our football guys. Is the one thing that Coach Carl and I noticed when we got here in August. It was our very first lift group, or was it we were outside? But in the summer, we still weren't able to get into the weight room, so we would do our lift outside on the field before we ran. Or after we ran. But the one thing we noticed, like after the first two groups, was we kind of got together and we're like, how'd they go? And he was like, it was good. They got their stuff done, but they didn't really talk to each other. Like they just put their head down and work, which not necessarily a problem with that if you're getting your work done. But there's also building that team camaraderie piece where I need you to talk to each other. I need you to know what's going on around you. I need you to be able to look across the weight room or the rack next to you and see what's going on and communicate with those guys around you. And that's one thing that we've really been trying to, I guess, break them out of old habits with is now if there's like a stretch of 5 minutes where I don't really hear voices in the weight room, I shut the music off so they know like how quiet the weight room is. And then it turns around, music goes back on, the rest of the lift's fine. But that's one thing that we're trying to work through here. And I steal from Joe Quinlan. But at Northwest, you're not really allowed to walk past somebody unless you give them a high five in a weight room. That's kind of one thing that we've implemented here. And not as strict, but where I'm giving high fives to everybody. And you kind of see how that carries over. And then they start giving high fives to each other. Energy picks up a little bit. So as long as all I ask is that you hold yourself and your teammates accountable. I guess whenever we're going over the lifts in the beginning, one thing the things I always say is have an energy about you, move with a sense of urgency. And if somebody needs to be called out, call them out. Because right now we're, I guess, history-wise, we're below average to an average football team. And if this is how you've operated for the past 5-6 years and it's not working for you, then something needs to change. So trying not to fall back into old habits and trying to be uncomfortable. And if we're not comfortable, if the lowest guy on the totem pole is not comfortable calling out one of our captains, then that doesn't make the captain better. If nobody wants to call out the captain, that doesn't make him a better football player or a better person. So it's just being able to confidently talk to one another and kind of just building that camaraderie, especially during this time.
Yeah, especially in the COVID era, right? And it's like, I felt like with just my experience, it's been tougher to kind of get that team component a little bit more. Just, I don't know where everybody else is at with their COVID regulations and everything, but we're still just kind of set, hey, stick to your rack. This is your spot. Don't move from there.
Right.
And it's just, man, it's still challenging to get people on rack 1 to talk to people on rack 5, and that's always I had to address it this morning too. I just, as you're talking to, it's like, man, what a time to take over a a new department in the COVID era. Good for you. That's great. Learning a lot. I'm sure even more than you would just in a normal year. But Coach, I've been to your facility. It's been probably 5 or 6 years ago. Are you guys still in the weight room, kind of down in the basement? So it's a good space. It looks like you guys got some nice equipment and everything, but you guys got a lot of athletes that you're trying to push through there. Are you using any tools to kind of maximize that time? What are the resources, software, whatever you're using to kind of maximize your efficiency there? Because you got to be on top of it.
Yep. So our space is like a big rectangle, about 2,000 square feet. So not massive, but there's smaller weight rooms out there. We got 10 racks. I could never in a million years argue or complain about the actual equipment that we have in the weight room. It's 90% of it's new. Got 10 new Sorinex racks. I guess those got installed like the month before I got there. So those are new. Since I've been there, we put iPads at every rack. We utilize TeamBuildr. We got new dumbbells, new bumper plates, change weights, everything. So everything down here is new. We put a TV in the weight room. But what makes my job a lot easier is TeamBuildr. Obviously, they're getting enough plugs. You know, they're a conference sponsor for you guys. They're also the podcast sponsor. They're sponsoring our conference that's in the summer. Like, we love TeamBuildr, but just the ability, or I guess the time it saves me from a programming and management standpoint, it allows me to do the job that I needed to do more, which is be on the floor coaching. The athletes have loved it, and that's kind of one of the biggest. Obviously, with COVID, that was the first thing I asked for was TeamBuildr. I was like, I don't want to pass around sheets in the middle of a pandemic and have 20 kids touch sheets over the course of a lift. I'd rather just stick a kid at his rack. He has his own iPad. We'll clean it afterwards, or her own iPad. But the kids have eaten it up, because my other point was, we're at a technology school and we have zero technology at all in the weight room. We should probably bring that in. And that got approved almost immediately. So TeamBuildr definitely makes my life easier. Once you figure it out, you know, their team's great. Hewitt's great. Any question you have about TeamBuildr, they get back to you, you know, instantly. There's Facebook groups going around with teams that have TeamBuildr, or schools that have TeamBuildr, to where you're bouncing questions off each other to try to figure stuff out. But that's a product that we use, our software that we use, that we love, our athletes love, and it's something that I'll use, you know, from now until forever, right? Probably. But yeah, so TeamBuildr is kind of the big thing for us here.
Yeah, I mean, we talk TeamBuildr a lot, but I don't want to just gloss over a couple things you did there. Number one, you leveraged the pandemic to get what you want. Hey, I don't want to pass around sheets. I need some iPads in here. And number two is something we talk about a lot on here is, you know, speak the language of the people where you're at. So you talked about, I think that was a great point you made. Hey, we're a tech school and we have no technology in here. What's going on with that? Like, when you put it in that frame, talk that language, like, you'd be a pretty crappy admin to say no to that. You know, that's a great job, man. That's kudos to you. That's awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And if you can look at like Colorado School of Mines, they're the same, you know, STEM type school that we are. And if you look at their program, they got force plates. They use TeamBuildr. All their stuff's top notch. So I kind of throw that in there too. Like, hey, you know, the other mine school right down the road, they have all this stuff. If we want to win some recruiting battles, we might want to kind of upgrade what we got going on down here.
Yeah, for sure. So, that's another great angle to attack there. Coach, what are some like hurdles you've had to overcome? We kind of talked about some probably, but are there any other additional hurdles either at Mines where you're at there, or maybe previously that you've had to kind of try to overcome during your career so far?
I'll touch on two. I'll touch on one here at Mines, and then I'll touch on one when I was at the Citadel. Obviously, with the Citadel being a military school, that comes with its own, I guess, not really issues, but hurdles that you have to jump through. And the big one that's, you know, looking at you in the face is their military schedule and their military obligations. Not only that, but their school schedule is just as rigorous as it is like here at Mines. Some kids like in season are taking 20 hours plus military duties or responsibilities plus, their sport responsibilities. So the schedule there is when you're in season, you don't really have to do a lot of like the military PT stuff. So like you don't have to wake up at 5:30 in the morning to go stand for attendance at PT and do PT. In season, you kind of get out of that. And then Donnell's actually done a great. So Donnell's also the military liaison there. So he's kind of the point of contact between the military side of the school and the athletic department. He's done a great job of trying to get the athletes completely out of that. It kind of disrupts what we're doing when they're having to do like in the off season and when they're having to go do PT in the morning and then come lift with us. So that's kind of one of the big hurdles is their military schedule, and working around it can be difficult. They have a lot of drop-ins there with the track team. So Citadel's unique in the sense that it's not like West Point. Like not everybody's contracted. So you can either take the contract route where the government pays for your school and you have to serve time afterwards in the military, or you can take the civilian route where you do all the military stuff for 4 years and then you graduate and you go on into just normal everyday life. But those kids that contract in and go into the Air Force, Army, whatever afterwards, they have a little bit more military responsibilities. And a lot of our track kids were contracted. And a lot of the like labs that they have to do, they call them labs that they have to do, were pretty much the same time we were lifting. So we would have throughout the week probably like 30, 40 kids on the track team that just have to come in at some random time and lift by themselves or with small groups. That was one kind of workaround. But the schedule there, because they're all in class all day, was you either lifted from like our first group started at 5:45. It was like 5:45. And then class started. They couldn't do anything after like 7:30ish or 8. So you had like an hour and a half, 2 hours in the morning to do stuff, or you had to wait until like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Like the middle of your day was completely wide open for the most part. Some of your in-season teams that get out of some of the military stuff were able to go in at like 12:30 and things like that. But like for freshmen, their first like full semester there, every single meal is mandatory on the clock. You don't have a choice. You have to go eat at this time. So like for breakfast, like they can't lift at 8 o'clock because they have to be at breakfast. So just things like that, where you're working around the military schedule. And then here, it's been a hurdle, but everyone has to deal with it. But it's been our group size. So we have a small weight room. Right now we're a little bit bigger, but so we played this fall. We got in, I think we were supposed to have like a 6 or 7 game season. We got in 4 games and the rest of our season got canceled. Once that happened, that was like, I think early November-ish. Once our season got canceled, our group size went from 15 to down to like 10, to where we weren't allowed to have more than 10 people in the weight room at a time, which is 1 person per rack. But with a football team who's lifting 2 or 3 times, at that point, season was over. We're back to lifting 3 times a week, finding, 90 time slots every 2 days for just football can be difficult. And then obviously you have all your other teams who are either their seasons were canceled, so they're full off-season mode, or you have your basketballs and track who are kind of in a preseason mode, but they're still lifting 3 times a week up until a certain point. So just trying to manage a schedule with the parameters of 10 people per lift group initially was difficult to work around, but we did it. We got through, had to go some Saturday groups, but it is what it is. We got through it. We're back to 15 now, so it's all right.
Well, like I said, kudos to you for taking over the head job in the middle of a pandemic, because that's
right.
So the good news is, like, hopefully whenever we're done with all this stuff, that, the scheduling at that point is going to be a cakewalk, hopefully, for you, which is
Right.
great. And, we had the same thing where it's like, I stare at that schedule all June and July, like, knowing what was coming. I was like, man, how are we going to do this? How am I going to satisfy all these coaches? And we were lucky enough to actually bump up to 20 be able to get 2 in our rack, which fit our facility pretty well.
Yep.
But we ended up putting a plan together. It was pretty creative, and my staff did a tremendous job. And at the end, it was like, we got to November, and it was like, man, I was pretty proud of that. Like to be able to pull that off was pretty cool. It was a challenge for sure. And it sounds like you did the same thing, which is awesome. Well, how about some resources? What do you like to dive into as far as books, podcasts, however you want to answer that question?
Yeah, I'll say I guess the way that I primarily like to learn is from reading books. I've started to get into webinars and podcasts a little bit more, mainly because I'm more of a visual learner. So sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, if I'm not sitting at my desk taking notes while I'm listening to it, a lot of it just goes in one ear and out the other. But I'm big into books. So right now I'm a little bit more into non-coaching direct books. Like I'm not reading a whole lot of like the systems or, the tier system book or anything like that. There's books obviously that I'm reading from like a business and leadership. Like right now I'm reading The Advantage, Patrick Lencioni, who wrote The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which I would recommend to anybody. That was something that was like a must read from Donnell Boucher. And Lencioni he's great. He's a great author. Definitely keeps you captivated while you're reading, especially with like the 5 dysfunctions, because he uses like a fable, just a story to display, I guess, like organizational health and things like that, which is great. It made it super easy to read. And then this one is Why Organizational Health Trumps Everything Else in Business. Started reading it last week. The schedule's been a little bit busy, so I haven't kind of been motoring through it like I have some of the other books, but big into that. Podcast I started to listen to more. Obviously, I've listened to this one since, I don't know, you pretty much first started, like, I don't even know when it was, somewhere between when I was at Central Washington, because I know I threw out Eric Hoyno's name to you. I know you had him on the show. Big into Iron Game Chalk Talk, the new one. I think they're doing a great job with that. And then those are the 2 that I listen to more on a consistent basis. And then I just kind of jump around. Like if I'm on social media and I see a couple coaches really talking about this one podcast in particular, I'm like, well, everybody's talking about it. I should probably give it a listen, see what they're talking about. So, something like the Rob Pacey stuff, the Strength Talking Shop with Matt, he has some good guests on there. Resilient Performance podcast is pretty good. And then from like a business side, I'll listen to Tim Ferriss every now and then. And then Ryan Hawk, I think his podcast is like The Learning Leader or something like that. I'll throw in one of his podcast episodes every now and then if the person that is on is I guess appealing to me. Like he had one that I recommend. I think it's Chris Holtman. He's I think the basketball coach at Ohio State. The podcast with him, I saw it on social media through Nick DeMarco. Thought, hey, may as well go listen to this. And there's a lot of great stuff. I was taking notes on my notes app on my phone, and I can just scroll through there with the amount of notes I took. So I definitely recommend that episode in particular to just about anybody.
How about, I think it's a great way to do it. Like just subscribe. My issue is I subscribe to like 14 different podcasts. So like every time we're turning around, there's like 7 episodes I want to listen to, so it's like just too much.
Yep.
So I like your approach with that. Just kind of have a couple, then just kind of look for the ones everybody's talking about from there.
Yep.
I guess the last question I have for you before we kind of move on to our finisher is you kind of mentioned your staff member there for a second. Just what's your approach with that, especially as a new coach? I guess how big of a staff do you have? How do you delegate? How do you manage? What are your thoughts around staffing?
Yeah, so it's myself and then the associate director, Carl Wise, was lucky enough to be in a position where whenever I was brought in, both strength coaching positions were vacant. So I was able to bring in whoever I wanted as my assistant. And Carl and I worked together at the Citadel for my entire time there. So luckily I was able to bring somebody in who I've worked with for the previous 13 months. And the reason why that is so key is I think setting up the program here was easier than it should have been because my assistant was already on board with what I was doing. Like our very first week, we came in, we had Tuesdays, Thursdays outside with football. And I was able to tell Carl, okay, you got this drill. You're leading the warm up, all stuff like that. And I was able to trust him, no problem, go. Whereas if I had to bring in somebody who I didn't really have a background on or fully trust, where maybe instead of when I'm running my drill, instead of maybe, coaching to the best of my ability, maybe I'm watching and seeing what's going on over there, making sure things are going on with the others, the other station, making sure things are going on properly. So that made my job a lot easier to where I was able to just kind of give him his teams. I knew that he knew how to operate, that he's going to hold his athletes to a standard to where I am, which I would do anyways after a certain extent. I'm very hands-off with Carl as far as, like, I'm not in the weight room watching him operate with his teams. Like, I trust that he's doing things the right way. I trust that he has a good program put together. I don't, like, we use TeamBuildr, so if I wanted to go look at his programs, I could very easily do that. But I don't, like, we do continuing education. I think that's very important. We're actually in a fortunate enough position to where we're employed by a hospital, and we both get like $1,000 per person per year for continuing education. So we do that. We do it as a staff where we'll pick one thing. We did the Exos, one of the Exos speed courses over winter break. And then we do a bunch of different, like, individual stuff where, like, every morning I never have to tell Carl, like, hey man, pick it up on your continuing education. Every morning I come in here, after I'm done coaching, and he's at his computer watching something, taking notes. So he's great as far as being a continued learner. I think he starts his doctorate degree in like May. So, but for me, I would think almost the best way to, not the best way, but in my opinion, because of my very limited experience, I think Carl has grown a lot as a coach by having autonomy and making his own mistakes. Not everything's perfect. There's stuff where he comes in after a lift group and he's like, man, I just didn't go how I thought it was going to. I need to make some changes. If I'm the guy that's constantly telling him that stuff, and maybe he doesn't know what to look for. So being able to make your own mistakes, learn from them, come in here, then we can have a conversation about it. We'll maybe try this next time, see how that goes. I think that helps a lot in the development when I'm not constantly standing over your shoulder watching everything go on. If it's a new hire, then they're going to have to learn the ropes. Like, I'm going to have to be watching, seeing how things are going, have them watch me, see how I operate, see how I expect things to go. And then after a little while, turn them loose. But I do think giving your staff members autonomy, also other responsibilities other than what they do with their teams, is very important for their development. Because I know for me, when I was at the Citadel, Donnell threw a bunch of different stuff on my plate as well. Like, during my 13 months there, at one point I was the internship coordinator. I was the cadet manager. I guess I oversaw the cadet managers who were not necessarily interns, but they came in and cleaned at the end of the night. They were just normal students that came in and cleaned at the end of the night. And what they got in return for that was they were able to use our weight room to work out instead of having to go to the fitness center on campus. But all great kids, but at one point I was in charge of them from a scheduling standpoint. At one point I was in charge of being the guy, or I guess the POC for our nutrition stuff. So I went out, then at the very end, I was kind of our tech guy, where anytime we were using Nintendo units or our smart speed system, or any sort of technology on jump mats, I was the guy that was programming and running that stuff. And so being able to have all those extra responsibilities, I believe, helped set me up to be better suited for a head job. And that's something that I try to do down here as well, where, Carl, he does most of the communication with all of his, his athletic trainers, head sport coaches, things like that. He's in charge of scheduling his teams. So we have a big whiteboard. And at the beginning of the semester, we'll write up all the teams and we'll be like, okay, we got to get everybody scheduled and fit. And I'll take my teams, you take your teams, we got to make it work, and it happens. So just being able to get them exposed to something other than just working with their teams, I think, is also great.
Yeah, I think that's all really good stuff. And I, like you said, just to be able to start that program with someone you had, a year experience with, that had to be huge, just because just simple things like, if you hire someone that you never worked with before, it's just little things like, he or she may call an exercise this, but you call it that. So just little stuff like that you have to get, and it's just one more thing you have to try to like figure out and get on the same page with, where you kind of come in, it's just like kind of already this kind of Batman and Robin setup, and let's just go, kick some butt and do this thing. That's huge. That's awesome.
Absolutely. I would definitely like attribute a lot of the early, like I guess not even early success, but the ongoing like sustained success that we've had here over the past 6 months to Coach Carl. Like if he wasn't here, I don't know if we're sitting in the same spot right now in February that we currently are. So
yeah,
so he's definitely been a great asset to have as the associate director here.
Yeah. Well, don't talk him up too much. You're going to get him hired somewhere else. You're going to lose him. So he's not that great. All right, Coach, you've been generous with your time. I know you're busy. So let's get into our final little finisher here. And this is the first time we're going to have this finisher sponsored by one of our sponsors. We moved Powerlift to this section. So they are the sponsor of our finisher. They are the leading manufacturer and distributor of heavy-duty strength training equipment for collegiate and high school athletic performance centers around the world. They bring over 20 years of experience to the strength conditioning world. All products are manufactured in their state-of-the-art facility in Jefferson, Iowa. They are so proud to support all the coaches making the big time where they're at. Mike Richardson is our show contact, so reach out to him. His stuff in the show notes. They are also sponsoring our conference. We really appreciate the guys at Powerlift. So, all right, Brock, let's do this, man. First question. What's your favorite office snack?
So I would say throughout the course of a year, it rotates. The entire first semester here was Bear Bites. It's like Kodiak Cakes version of like Teddy Grahams almost, like little mini graham crackers. Would go through probably 2 boxes a week, like just crush them. Right now, it is like Kind bars and cheese sticks that I'm crushing. So that's what it is now.
Yeah, I'm gonna look up the Bear Bites. That sounds good.
They're awesome.
You have 15 minutes to work out yourself. What are you doing?
I'm deadlifting for all 15 minutes. That's it.
It's good. You do Dead Simber? Do you do that?
I did. Yep. Yeah. That's kind of like what I guess rekindled my love for deadlifting, because for the longest time I actually got like scared away from it because I'd never been hurt in the weight room for once. It was during deadlifting, so I just kind of went away from it. And then 2 Decembers ago, I kind of got involved and started to get my strength back from a deadlift perspective, and I just fell in love with it. So
nice, awesome.
Yep.
What's the most embarrassing moment you've had coaching in front of your athletes?
I'll say there's 2 of them that kind of stick out. They're not like over the top embarrassing, but they're kind of like, man, I wish I wouldn't have said that. But so I guess the first time was when I was a GA. I was at the whiteboard. We had our lift written on a whiteboard. We'd go over it, and I just like could not say what I wanted to. So I was just like stumbling over my words. We were probably at the whiteboard for a solid like 8-9 minutes going over the lift just because I couldn't say what I wanted to, and it was just like super frustrating. So that was something that was kind of embarrassing. And then one time it was at the Citadel where we had just had like 3 straight football groups. And then right afterwards, volleyball came in, and they came in the weight room, and I was like, hey, what's going on, fellas? How's it going? And I was just like, oh, no. I just called all these volleyball players fellas, and they looked at me, and they're like, Coach, like, what the heck? Like, I know we're getting big, but we're still ladies. Like, yeah, I'm sorry. But that was kind of embarrassing. I turned red. Oh, no, there's actually one over the pandemic. Got bored. I hopped on TikTok. I'm a big fan of your Super Bowl TikToks. But I made like one like TikTok dance, and I try to keep everything private to where nobody could see it. I made one public, and all of my athletes saw it. They threw it in the group me, and I was just like, oh no, like this is like worst case scenario. So that was pretty embarrassing. And then Donnell found out about it. He brought it up, just roasted me. It was incredible.
Yeah, it's TikTok's interesting. A lot of our athletes talk to me about it, and I just kind of ignore it. I just kind of laugh and move on. But good. Well, hey man, I really appreciate you taking the time to hop on here today. And like I said, to take over as a head during COVID and the pandemic's a challenge. And it sounds like you're killing it. So keep doing the good work. Oh, I got one more question for you. Sorry. This is our kind of staple question. What is, or who are a couple coaches you think, or one small school coach who you think does a great job, deserves a shout out?
Yeah, I'll shout out two real quick. One is Anthony Cockrell. He's an assistant director at UMBC. So Division I, but there's no football there, so it's a little bit smaller department. He's great. I interned with him at TCU. He's awesome. And then Reggie Overton, he just took over as the director of strength and conditioning at IUP Division II school out in Pennsylvania. They both do awesome stuff. You can follow them on social media, but those are two guys that definitely deserve a shout out that are doing some great stuff.
Cool. Awesome, Coach. Well, like I said, appreciate your time. Keep killing it out there. Try to stay warm the best you can. Good luck with everything, and we will talk to you soon.
Yep. Awesome. Appreciate you having me on.